You're a developer at a successful software company. You've been facing gradual slowdowns in your popular online service. The team suspects that it's due to the existing commodity hardware. After installing new, expensive servers and migrating data, there's no improvement in performance. This raises two key questions. Why didn't high-cost hardware solve the issue? And what actually is causing the slowdown? If you're enjoying this content, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Ignoring database optimization refers to the oversight of not adequately tuning or refining the performance of a database system. Database optimization involves various practices and techniques to enhance the efficiency of storing, retrieving, and managing data. This process is crucial because an unoptimized database can become a major performance bottleneck, leading to slow query responses and inefficient data handling, significantly impacting the overall performance of software applications. When database optimization is ignored, even high-end hardware upgrades fail to resolve these performance issues, as the problem lies in how the database processes and manages data, not in the hardware's computing power. What we mean to say is that ignoring database optimizations is like having a messy, unorganized filing system in an office. Even if you buy the fastest computers and the best equipment for the office, if your files are disorganized and hard to find, work will still be slow. Database optimizations is like organizing files efficiently so you can find and use them quickly, which is essential for the office, or in this case, the software, to work smoothly and fast. What can you do to get that old data store running faster? Database indexing. This involves creating specific structures within the database to speed up data retrieval. Just like an index in a book helps you find information quickly, database indexes help locate data without scanning the entire database. Imagine you're in a library looking for a specific book. This library has no classification system, has no signs, it does not have a database that allows you to search for book titles, nothing that will give you any code to guide you to the right shelf to find the right book. When you don't have proper database indexing, this is exactly what you put your database through each and every time the data is requested. The database has to scan all the data from beginning to end in the tables you requested until it finds and returns the right data. The insidious part of this problem is that you likely won't notice it in early development, especially when a database is small. If your developers have powerful workstations, this problem can easily slip into production and you won't notice it until your data grows. Your requests will begin to slow down exponentially. Stronger hardware will help up to a point, but you'll reach those limits quickly. The key to implementing proper database indexing is understanding how the data is being queried and, more precisely, filtered. Implementing proper indexes to support these queries by finding the right data faster is key. Query optimization. This is about writing efficient database queries, requests for data, that minimize the time and resources needed to get data. Well-optimized queries can significantly reduce the load on the database. Imagine that you need to pick up a single item from the grocery store. The grocery store is just down the road. It's a straight line from your house. This would be such a simple thing if it weren't for the fact that you're on a street that's one way and the direction is facing away from the store. So now, unfortunately, because of the way that the street was designed, you have to take a detour in order to get to the grocery store. The return will be simple, but that's the nature of database systems. Finding the right data is usually the overhead. When a programmer creates a new feature or functionality, they tend to think that the database has the structure that absolutely can't change. It's almost as if it's against their religion to change the structure in any way. So developers adapt their queries to the existing structure. It doesn't matter what detours they need to take to get the data they want for their feature. I've seen queries that were so messy, Snakes during mating season would have just stayed away. Just because a query returns the data you need doesn't necessarily mean it's an optimized query, especially if you're developing on a powerful workstation with very little data. Escalate this to a DBA or a senior developer so they can code review new queries. Also ensure indexes exist for these new queries to retrieve data quickly. Regular database maintenance. This includes routine tasks like updating statistics, rebuilding indexes, and cleaning up unnecessary data. Regular maintenance ensures the database runs smoothly and efficiently. Imagine you send a query to a database and you get data in return that you know is inaccurate. You go digging manually into the tables and you can see the raw data for yourself. You write this data down on a piece of paper or a notepad, and you start to do your calculations manually, only to see that your query is returning data that is not accurate. If you ever had these queries that don't return accurate data, you've probably been the victim of a corrupt index. Now, I'll admit that those are rare. In 30 years, I've seen it 3 or 4 times. It happens, I think, when you add a lot of data on a regular basis and you rely on the engine to keep up and update the indexes all the time. I've also seen corrupt databases, but that's a completely different topic. The DevOps team at my work decided to conduct daily rebuilds of indexes as part of the backup routine. Once that was implemented, we haven't seen a corrupt index since. Here's another perspective. In North America, we have these shows about people who, for whatever reason, can't throw anything away. The term is hoarding. These people firmly believe that the things they keep will eventually become useful, so they can't throw anything out. Imagine living in a house so full of junk that you have only half a bed to sleep, but no spouse. Making your way to the bathroom is challenging. And your children's greatest fear is that one day they'll find you dead under an avalanche of junk. Let's break this down. Now, go back to the analogy of the house of a hoarder. We've solved the corrupt index problem, which means technically we have a list of everything inside the house and where it's located. The list is up to date and accurate. The problem we have not solved is that we still have mountains of junk data that we potentially have to go through every time we run a query. However, if these mountains of data are completely unimportant, I suggest you agree on a purge strategy to keep your data as lean as possible. This will help your system remain performant in the long run. Caching strategies. Implementing caching means temporarily storing frequently accessed data in a rapidly accessible location. This reduces the load on the database by avoiding repeated data retrieval operations. Imagine you're building a multilingual system. In your infinite wisdom, you decide to store all the text for the software in the database server. Your logic is this. It becomes trivial for someone to edit any term or text using the UI. It's also easily shared across a server farm. The system is self-contained so that the backup process will pick up everything. Your intent is to write queries that will be specialized for every form or page that will retrieve all the text in the language the user needs. So the first page you create for your application is the home page. Clients are thrilled because they have a tool where they can change the content of their homepage. Every time one of their users goes to the system, they can have a homepage that's personalized to their organization. Anytime a user goes to the homepage, the system creates a query to get all the text for the homepage for this user's language, and it's displayed on the home screen. If the next user is using the same language, the system will still get fresh data because the client specified it's possible that the content of the homepage was edited a second ago. Now imagine you have 500 clients, each with at least 10,000 employees. From personal experience, just rendering the homepage for such a system at peak hours of operation will require monstrous hardware. And the only thing that you're doing is storing HTML or text and sending it to the browser. In the last few years, systems have become so fast that people got used to incredible performance and capabilities. But when you have a design that's essentially flawed from the beginning, it doesn't matter what hardware or technology you use. What if you started to use caching? Every time that you edit the homepage, you update the cache. The homepage is ready to go in the cache whenever you need it. No fancy queries are essentially requested from a Redis server or similar technology with a single key representing this client and language. Mathematically speaking, you've just prevented at least 5 million queries. A lot more, because every time you're done with an operation, you return to the home page, then go to a new page and perform another operation. If you're asking for the same data over and over again, then implementing proper caching is critically important. There are many caching approaches and technologies out there. I am certain that there is one perfect for you and your needs. But I again guarantee you that if you want to destroy the performance of your software completely, avoiding caching will do it. There will come a time when your users will leave your services as if they were guided by Moses himself going out of Egypt. Incidentally, some of us will say, well, you're wrong because SQL Server itself has caching mechanisms. That's true. However, you're not considering the fact that the caching mechanism is on the SQL Server itself. You still have to pass all that data across the wire, and it will happen repeatedly, even if it's cached data. It's not like the connector is going to send a signal to the client and say, well, remember that data that I sent to you 5 milliseconds ago and 10 milliseconds ago and 50 milliseconds ago. Well, this one is the same thing. That's just not going to happen. It's going to keep sending the same old thing across the wire over and over again. If the data is minimal, that's not a big deal. But with enough requests and enough of a sizable chunk of data, again, you'll completely destroy your performance. Database sharding. This involves splitting a large database into smaller, more manageable pieces, each stored on different servers. Sharding can greatly improve performance by distributing the load. Imagine you're working in a restaurant. You're the only waiter. It's your job to handle all the customers at all the 100 tables in the restaurant. It may not look too bad early in the morning and late at night when there's nobody in the restaurant. In peak times, however, your stress level will skyrocket and your customer experience will plummet. As a single waiter, depending on how many customers you need to handle, you will fall short in promptly handling their requests. Let's take the same example, but we have multiple waiters this time. Suppose we implement 5 waiters and assign them 20 tables each. Whatever incident happens at a single table will not affect the other waiters. They can continue to service their customers at maximum efficiency. What we've essentially done is that we've distributed the load. Suppose we're replicating an online retailer that has millions of products. In that case, it'll quickly become obvious, and putting all those products inside a single database server will make no sense. It's just too much. A better method would be to implement sharding and give a fraction of those products to dedicated database servers. For example, if we implement 20 database servers, they can each contain, let's say, 1 million products. This doesn't seem like much, but those database servers also have to manage inventory. They have to manage reviews and ratings, and you can quickly see how distributing this can become a significant advantage. There's no secret recipe for sharding. You can take the 20 million products, break them into 50-50 shards, and put them on different database servers. Later on, if you notice that some of those products are generating a much higher load than others, you can move them to a database server with a lesser load, or potentially a new one that would handle this extra load, liberating your other servers. Data archiving. Moving older, less frequently accessed data to separate storage can improve performance. It ensures that the most accessed data is more readily available and that the database isn't bogged down with old data. If your data is important and you don't want to delete it, that's okay. What's not okay is that this mountain of data slows down your system. The user experience is key. Nothing ruins the user experience like a slow system. If your data is not necessary to provide at least 80% of your system's functionality, then move it to a different database. Some people may think this is partitioning or sharding, but not exactly. The key concept is that you should have the data required by at least 80% of your system in one place, and the remaining 20% in another database. That database can be cluttered, but it's okay. Think of the difference between your house and your garage. If you're like me, your house is relatively clean and orderly, and your garage less so. If you need something from the garage, just go get it. Choosing the right database types. Different databases, like SQL versus NoSQL, are suited for different kinds of data and access patterns. Selecting the right ones based on your application's need can enhance performance. Everybody's opinion of SQL and NoSQL differs and depends on their experience. I usually tell them apart by using two very simple analogies. Suppose you're dealing with a situation where you're keeping a record. A good example is a bank record. Then SQL is more for you. This is a great system where you need to quickly access data in a very simple way, especially data that is structurally the same over and over. The key word here is structured. In the case of a NoSQL database, the analogy that I love to use is a document. Some people argue that a form is a document and will have the same structure repeatedly because it has the same field. I agree with this, but if you're in a situation where people are completing forms, you're not going to use each and every one of those fields in filters or mathematical calculations, or you're also not going to need a subset of each form. If you don't need that, the NoSQL approach will be better for you. I think the best example is a search engine. A search engine will store the content of HTML pages or any other content in a NoSQL format, essentially storing those in documents. If you run a search and you get a hit, you can retrieve the appropriate documents. There's also nothing that prevents you from mixing these two strategies if it makes sense. You can have a portion of the data stored in documents, and you can have the record portions stored in a structured database. You then get the best of both worlds. SQL tends to be more suited to making reports, but the NoSQL technologies are making great strides to catch up. Monitoring and profiling. Regularly monitoring database performance and profiling queries help identify bottlenecks. This ongoing analysis allows for continuous improvement and optimization of the database. Imagine you get married to your dream spouse. You love this person so much you want them to have everything they could possibly need. You also completely trust them. So you give them access to your bank account and credit cards and let them have whatever they need. You love this person and you know that they will not go overboard on their spending. So you focus on what you need to focus on and you don't really keep an eye on the finances. One day, you get a call, your spouse is trying to purchase something from a store, but the purchase is being declined. They're trying to get something reasonable, and you both agreed that they should get it. While they're on the phone, you go to your bank and look at how much money is left in the checking account and the credit cards. The blood in your vein turns to ice in half a second when you see the credit card is over the limit and there's no money left in the checking account. For many of us, this seems like a very far-fetched example, or is it? But if one of you has been married at some point, you understand the importance of monitoring finances and establishing a budget. And because of this, it is the perfect story for teaching you the importance of monitoring and profiling your database. This is the last safeguard before disaster. If nothing else, you have to monitor your database servers to see if they are overloaded and why. This monitoring will tell you that there are problems and what those problems are, and hopefully you can then fix them before they become emergencies or outages.